Hello, everybody. I'm Matt McMullen. I'm your host this afternoon. Just want to run through some housekeeping items. The emergency exits are out through the door and turn left. They'll be straight ahead of you. The bathrooms are just out to your right and on your right-hand side. Just want to remind everybody to please submit your session feedback in the apps. The sessions are all recorded and will be available in a week or two after the event. And please ensure all your devices are on silent. So for this session, which is the built and delivered in 6 months using serverless technical patterns and microservices, please welcome your presenter, Len Henry.
Hi, folks. Can everyone hear me okay? My name is Len Henry. I'm a solutions architect with Amazon Web Services for the public sector. And I'm up here with me, we'll be in a few minutes up on stage. You guys can come on up. We've got Jack McGurk and Maureen Foreman from the College Board, and we're going to be talking about one of their exciting solutions that they developed on our AWS platform. So some ground rules. We definitely are open to questions, but we have scheduled time at the end for a lot more of them. But if anything comes to mind, we'll definitely try to accommodate them as we go through. So let's jump right in. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about some enabling technologies that we're able to help the College Board develop this platform. And then Maureen and Jack are going to get into and talk to in more detail about the platform. So I've been working with the College Board for quite a few years now, and I can say I've personally witnessed the evolution of cloud technology adoption at the College Board. A couple of things I can say based on that experience. Innovation is not a byproduct. That means that what you see is actually the result of investments by the College Board. You'll also see that people are an organization's greatest asset, because good people will take whatever technologies that are there, and they will use them to solve problems. And it's important to use technologies that really meet your needs. We know how large the technology landscape is, so it's really important to make some good choices about that. And Amazon Web Services is one of the technologies that has enabled the College Board to be successful. So in terms of enabling technologies, and I'll talk to some of these quite quickly, actually. We'll talk about serverless and also about React.js, which is one of the components that College Board has used. We'll talk about Dynamo and Cognito. There's obviously a large landscape when we talk about serverless, but these are the ones that are particularly relevant to this talk. So first off, I want to say what serverless is. I know probably everyone's familiar with what serverless is, but the key things about serverless is that there's no infrastructure provisioning, no management. There's automatic scaling. You pay for the value that you get out of it, and it's highly available and secure. And in simpler language, it's no server or container management. You get flexible scaling. It's highly available, and there's no idle capacity. Pay-as-you-go is a big function of serverless. Now, when we say serverless, there's a lot of different category of services that are considered serverless. When it comes to compute, in particular, we talk about AWS Lambda, which is our function as a service, and AWS Fargate. When it comes to data stores, you have our simple S3 service, which a lot of folks don't think of as a serverless service, but the idea behind it is you get as much capacity as you need, and you get to be able to access however much resources to be able to do what you need for storage. You have our Aurora Serverless, which is our serverless database as a service. And then we have Amazon DynamoDB, which is our key value and document store database. In terms of integration, we have our Amazon API Gateway, which allows you to basically map behind all sorts of functions as a service, as well as on-premise web services. We have our SQS, which is our simple queue service, which is exactly like it sounds, which is our service for being able to provide you a queue functionality for your applications. We have our SNS, which is, sometimes I think about SNS, but the idea to think of it is a messaging platform designed to send out to all sorts of endpoints, everything from making a web service call to sending something out to emails. We have step functions, which is our orchestration framework for Lambda, as well as other compute resources. And then we have AppSync, which is basically our managed GraphQL service. So let's talk about compute for a second. How many folks here are familiar with Lambda? It's been out for quite a few years. It's our function as a service. It's serverless, event-driven code execution. Essentially what you do is you bring your code, and that's what you write, and then we set up the infrastructure for you. It's designed for short-lived, which is expanded actually, because we launched support for up to 15 minutes. It supports all language runtimes. The reason why we say that is because it actually supports custom runtimes, but there's actually built-in support for several different languages. And it has data source integrations for many of the AWS services already. We also have our serverless container service, which is Fargate, and it's serverless compute engine for containers. It's designed for more long-running processes. You can bring your existing code, so if you have something written for something like Tomcat, Node.js, you can leverage it, and basically anything you can use running inside of a container. And it's a fully managed orchestration. You don't even have to take care of launching servers. We take care of all of that for you. All you do is you take your container image and how the options you have for scaling and bring it into the service. So the big picture about operational responsibility, we have this thing known as a shared responsibility model. But when it comes to AWS services, to think of how much you're responsible for versus what we're responsible for, you have Lambda, which is more of responsibility on the side of AWS and less on your side. Essentially, all you bring to the table is your application code. Down to Fargate, which is more responsibility on your side, but we take care of a lot of the things like cluster scaling. We take care of the orchestration and provisioning of resources. And then you have our container services, ECS and EKS, where you're actually more involved in actually monitoring the cluster and making sure resources are there for scaling up and then making choices as to how those resources are configured. The big takeaway for this, though, is that depending on where you are in this, there'll be more responsibility for you or less depending on your choices. And also I want to highlight that it is dependent on which container service you choose as well, because essentially Fargate leaves a lot of the responsibility up to AWS. Another thing to highlight when talking about serverless is that you basically have to change the way in which you develop code for serverless. This is based off of a lot of feedback that I've gotten from working with customers who've gone through this serverless journey. One of the first questions they ask is, well, how do I even develop code for serverless? Big picture to keep in mind is that most folks are used to working with monolithic development life cycles. You're used to having all your developers working on a handful or maybe even one big piece of code. And then you essentially have one development pipeline where everyone works along that pipeline. The key difference once you move to microservices now is that there's a big separation of responsibility and that there's now actually potentially multiple pipelines. The best practices that want to guide how you actually leverage that new environment is you want to decompose for agility. You want to have microservices to be able to split up responsibility. We have this thing in Amazon called the two-pizza team, which basically refers to you want folks who are responsible for just enough code for only 2 pizzas to be able to feed. You also want to automate everything. Automation is a big thing. It's not just for Amazon as a corporate culture, but it's also for how we do everything in AWS. You want to standardize your tools. And one of the recommendations we also want to mention is that you want to do belts and suspenders. You don't want to do hard restrictions on folks. Like you don't want to restrict folks that they don't feel comfortable and that they are free to be able to be creative. But you do want to do things like implement governance, and you also want to provide templates and blueprints so that they're able to take that and replicate good practices rather than you enforcing them to. And then the other thing we want to highlight is you want to have infrastructure as code, because that allows you to build up your stack in a more repeatable fashion. It actually allows you to do the belts and suspenders, because if you have it in infrastructure as code, you can actually implement your best practices as a part of the infrastructure as code. Here's some of the services that you may want to consider using for your DevOps tools, for your CI/CD process in AWS. There's also plenty of talks at the summit on some of these tooling. But when you look at source, you have our code commit service, which is kind of a Git compatible source repository. When you have build, we have our code build. Code build also supports testing as well, and it has integration with third-party test frameworks like Selenium and BlazeMeter. You have our deploy service, which is AWS Code Deploy, which allows you to deploy to things like on-premise servers, EC2, or Lambda. And then you have our monitoring service, which is X-Ray, which allows you to basically implement logging and monitoring across your development and production resources. And then an entire orchestration framework is provided by Code Pipeline. So a couple of things to highlight is that a lot of the AWS developer tools are not only been designed to support your DevOps pipelines, but are specifically designed to also work with serverless development. So you can see how long ago we've had the support for Lambda, for example, in code pipeline and CloudFormation, to now having the ability to do Lambda deployments, Canary Lambda deployments using code deploy. So there's a significant investment on the part of Amazon in being able to support doing development for serverless solutions. And a couple things also to highlight along the serverless journey is that a lot of customers ask, well, how do I log and monitor? Because now you're not only looking at resources that are running on a specific server that you have an agent running on. You're now looking at, for example, a single page app running in S3, or you're running as a function that's orchestrated by step functions. So now you have something like X-Ray, which is an enterprise-wide solution, cloud scale for being able to incorporate into your modern application. There's integrations with many of the AWS services. You can also leverage it on your code on-prem. And it provides a lot of different, not only is there built-in integration in services like Lambda and API Gateway, but you can also be able to leverage it using API as well. So it becomes a one-stop solution for monitoring and logging for your platforms. Another question I get asked, and folks are pretty serious when they ask this question too, which is, how do I edit my code and debug them if it's now serverless? Great news is that your traditional IDEs work pretty well. We also make an IDE available in a browser called Cloud9. Check it out. It's pretty cool. But we make SDKs available that work with a lot of different toolkits. Like there's stuff for IntelliJ, for Java, Python. You can use Visual Studio. We have a toolkit for Visual Studio Code. There's also a lot of different integrations with a lot of different IDEs as well. But we also make available tools that allow you to do localized development from any of our serverless platforms like Lambda. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you're doing your serverless journey, it's really important to try to model how you actually provision your infrastructure as code. Because one of the things is now you're no longer thinking about servers, you're no longer thinking about clusters, but you still want to have some sort of way of representing it so that it's easier for you to design it. So it's important to visualize and then also leverage tooling that allows you to be able to standardize and perhaps represent it as infrastructure as code. So some of the things you see here on this diagram of a way in which you can represent a DevOps pipeline for a serverless solution is you can use tools like code commit. You can use Lambda to be able to orchestrate pipelines. And in fact, I have a talk right after this with an organization that actually leverages Lambda as a part of their pipeline for deploying. Then you have supporting services like code build, CloudFormation. SNS is a popular one. SNS is both a mechanism for your applications to deliver messages and a way for you to keep track of processes for your DevOps pipeline. And then you have S3. S3 is a lot of things, everything from storing of objects that are part of your content all the way through something that stores the output of any of your processes that are executing or a logging framework. I also want to call out the AWS Cloud Development Kit, which allows you to essentially, we're providing you something that supports typed languages that then generates infrastructure as code via CloudFormation. So you can use your popular languages like TypeScript, JavaScript, C# to be able to represent your actual infrastructure, and then it generates CloudFormation. So one of the patterns we see is that folks actually use CDK, write out the infrastructure as code, check that into their source repository. Their build process takes the CDK, generates the CloudFormation, and actually generates the actual environment when it actually runs it. And then you can use this as a part of a validation step as well, because your CDK can generate CloudFormation, deploy the infrastructure, test it, and then commit to some sort of pipeline. And it also becomes a really quick way for both the infrastructure teams and developer teams to communicate, because you can provide templates with CDK that can stand up things like VPCs, security groups, all the different, you can do things like Fargate services, Lambda functions, and then provide that over to your actual developers. They'll incorporate that into their code, and then if folks can actually use the same language for doing both infrastructure and development. Another thing we want to talk about is SAM, which is our serverless application model. That's another thing, was an extension to CloudFormation. It basically allows you to do things like functions, APIs, and DynamoDB tables. SAM actually has a way for you to do a local testing. It is an open specification. And recently we launched support for API Gateway authorizers and cores and SSE and managed policies. And so what I find is a lot of customers have a lot of options in terms of how they want to stand up infrastructure for their serverless solutions. Just know that these two are out there. And actually, a lot of the demos that we have for AWS come in SAM format. So if you go to see like a Lambda demo or a Lambda templates, it actually gets deployed as SAM. So DynamoDB, it's our fully managed relational database for any scale. You're not responsible for any servers. You don't have to worry about maintenance. It's serverless. It's auto-scaling. You can do backup and restore as configuration. There's support for things like global tables, so you can have tables that are represented in multiple regions. It's very high performance, designed for very low latency, high throughput. It's very secure. You have encryption at rest, in transit. It supports a lot of different compliance frameworks. So like I said, it's because of the scalability and there's no servers, it's definitely, you should consider it a part of your serverless toolkit. And it does have Lambda integration as well. A couple of things I want to highlight about Dynamo is that one of the things we launched last year for Dynamo was on demand. There is always a way for you to be able to increase the scalability of Dynamo by being able to tune what's known as capacity units. But there were many different mechanisms in play to make that happen. We've kind of taken the guesswork out of that and provided for you as an automatic thing for you to be able to basically scale up capacity based off of your needs. Cognito is another service to consider as a part of any sort of solution. A couple of things I want to highlight about that is that you don't have to worry about your authentication or authorization. It's a single solution for doing that. It's designed for web and mobile apps. It handles both authentication and identity. You can use, it has a built-in managed user directory, or you can leverage federation to use things like Active Directory or other types of directory. You also can integrate with things like Facebook, Google, Amazon, OpenID. It provides you a way to be able to proxy AWS credentials, and it supports standard tokens. So some of the use cases you'll see for that is, like I mentioned, the enterprise integration with stuff like SAML. Also, you can use it for business to customer with some of the popular like Google, Facebook, Amazon. And then also it has support for some of the services too, like IoT Core. The other thing I want to highlight about Cognito is it supports customized user workflows. And what I mean by that is that it is an authentication framework, it is an identity framework, but it does allow you to customize things like the user sign up, reset password, customize what type of user profile data is stored. You can do token-based authentication. You can also do multi-factor authentication. And you can customize these using Lambda. So here's an example of some of the things you can customize for the different types of events that happen as a part of your authentication flow. These slides are going to be available afterwards, by the way, so it's no need. You don't have to worry to keep track of this stuff. But just the thing to keep in mind is that a lot of this is customizable. Just because you're using Cognito doesn't mean it restricts the options that you have for things like password reset or how the options you have for choosing the policies for your passwords, for example. And Cognito, like I mentioned, there's actually several tokens that's possible depending on which type of authentication framework you're using. And then you can do JSON tokens that have different types for different use cases. And for example, the access tokens can be cached. And you can leverage that to be able to provide repeated access if someone provides just a token for coming in for your API or your endpoint. Also want to highlight AWS Amplify. One of the feedback we got is that we got a lot of different services and a lot of different tools that make it easier for folks to write applications. But what about if I just want to start and I don't want to worry about user interfaces so much and I just want to jump in and make use of services? So that's why we made available Amplify. It's a JavaScript library that provides a declarative interface for doing, and the goal of this is for you to be able to have the shortest amount of code possible for you to be able to jump into developing an app. It has extensions for React and React Native, and it has a bunch of built-in components and high-order components for doing things like authentication and authorization. Just to give you a taste of what that looks like, this is an auth module that provides built-in user interface and everything and processing for logging into a website. And so if you think about being able to get this simple and straightforward with doing your authentication and authorization, that's what we had in mind about Amplify. There should be some other talks here at the summit about Amplify, and there's definitely more available. There's even a GitHub repository for it. So I want to turn it over to Maureen now to talk about the College Board's experience.
Hi, everyone. Everybody can hear me? Okay. Great. So I'm going to open us up by telling you a little bit about the College Board. So College Board is a 119-year-old nonprofit. You likely know us best for the SAT, PSAT, and AP. But Jack and I have the privilege of working in our Access to Opportunity part of the organization, a division that is really laser-focused on solving problems for students who are looking to get to and through college and career. So with that, we created the College Board Opportunity Scholarships Program to guide students through the journey to college and motivate and reward them with scholarships along the way. What this program is a $25 million investment in scholarships for students over the next 5 years. We opened the scholarship program with the class of 2020. We co-timed the launch of the program with the release of PSAT scores, so when we have kids' eyes and ears on our College Board properties. The reason that was critical is we wanted students to opt into the program and complete their journey with us over their junior and senior year timelines. What that journey looks like is this. Each of these icons represents a scholarship that is timed to specific points in a student's junior and senior years that are really important for them to be the most prepared, most educated, and the most ready for their next step after high school. When we launched in December of 2018, we started with Build Your College List for a chance at $500 scholarship and Practice for the SAT, which is a chance at a $1,000 scholarship. In terms of scale, each month that each of these scholarships are open, there are 100 students who are awarded a $500 scholarship and 150 students who are awarded a $1,500 scholarship opportunity. The timing matters, right? So during a student's essentially winter and building into spring of their junior year, we want them to be researching colleges that may be a best fit for them. So building a college list of 6 or more universities on Big Future earns them a chance at that $500 scholarship. We want to connect students with our investment in free official SAT practice with Khan Academy. That's a chance at a $1,000 scholarship opportunity, and 150 students are awarded those scholarships each month. By nudging students at a time that matters throughout their junior and senior year, we're impacting those students at critical points when they're thinking about what comes next for them. So as they continue their roadmap, you'll see that this represents that simple guide, that simple way to understand which sort of things matter most when they're preparing for college, when they're thinking about what comes next for them, and how they can be connected with the free resources that the College Board has invested in to make those opportunities available for all students. When we designed the Opportunity Scholarships program, we wanted it to feel like a simple action plan. We wanted to clearly communicate when these scholarship opportunities are open and available. We also wanted to link them directly to the different sites that they would use to earn those scholarship opportunities. So when a student selects Build Your College List, they're connected right to Big Future, where they have a chance to use a world-class college search tool and save colleges to their list that they're thinking about, so they can have those important conversations with caring adults who are helping them consider their options for their future. When they select Practice for the SAT, they need to practice for 6 or more hours on Khan Academy in order to earn that entry. So we connect them right to official SAT practice, where for students who weren't aware that there was this free and compelling resource at their disposal, they're now linked directly there, and they have an opportunity for a chance at $1,000 scholarships. So for each of the scholarships on their action plan, we're aligning the timing, along with the scholarship opportunities and the free resources. So at this point, the College Board Opportunity Scholarships program has been open for 6 months. We've had over 232,000 students join us on this journey. These are some of our student winners. In terms of scale and impact, we're giving away 4,000 scholarships just for the class of 2020, which means that as we've had Build, Practice, and now the Improve Your Score Scholarship open for students, we've directly impacted 1,525 students and offered those students $1.2 million in scholarships to date. Every month, that scholarship pool grows. Every month, we have more winners who are touched by this program individually. And every month, students just like these are telling their peers and their communities about the impact that College Board has had on them. And they're saying, this is a win-win program. These are things I should have been doing, may have been doing already, but now I'm connected to free resources and a chance to earn these scholarships. So we're really excited about where this program is today and where it's going next, and how this impact will continue to grow exponentially over the next 5 years. And so with that, I'll take it to Jack, who's going to tell us a little bit more about how we got there.
Thank you, Maureen. So Len has covered overviews of serverless technologies that AWS provides. Maureen just gave you an overview of the Opportunity Scholarship Program that we built. And now I'm going to kind of connect you to the speed. So we talked about 6 months. Where does that tie in? So we start here on October 18th, 2018. Our CEO joined Robin Roberts on the set of Good Morning America for a 15-minute segment to announce the launch of this scholarship program. 3 students joined them on stage who had inspired the simplicity in which the program was trying to achieve, and they were given a surprise $40,000 scholarship on stage. In our Reston office, we joined down in a large conference room. We watched it. This very much gets to the heart of the mission of the College Board, and we're all very proud, and it incentivizes us every day to be able to deliver these kinds of moments. Now, if you backdate from October 2018 to April 2018, from a group perspective, we had just stood up a new Scrum team called Team Opportunity. We had just finished a quarterly planning cycle that helped us kind of begin to work on this project. And we took a very simple story. If you're familiar with Agile, as a team, we want to build a single web page application so that we can learn about Catapult. Things to note here, we had 0 lines of code at this point in time. So we just talked about October 2018, CEOs on the stage. Here we are in April, we have 0 lines of code. In a few minutes, we'll talk about what Catapult is. Len kind of alluded to this in terms of Cognito. So it's a security and authentication pattern that we built at the College Board that leverages AWS Cognito. We just branded it Catapult, so we have an internal identity to it. So if you do some math here between April 10th and October 18th, there's 191 calendar days. And in that 191 calendar days, there's 133 business days. But David Coleman didn't wake up and decide to go on Good Morning America on the day that he went on Good Morning America. So we had to make a commitment to this launch in September. So from 0 lines of code on April 10th, in 105 business days, we were in a position to be able to commit to this program launch. So that's an aspect of the speed that serverless has helped provide for us. And I think Maureen mentioned earlier, we're the SAT company, we're the PSAT company, and how the launch of the program was timed when a bunch of students were going to come to the College Board, and we were going to intercept them and have them learn about this program. So not only did we have to build quickly, we had to build where our peak day was the day that we launched. So we had to build with speed, with scale, and with security. So I think the next aspect of this is just briefly overview the serverless and React.js components of our solution. So here, our solution, we have in simple boxes, we have Amazon CloudFront that serves up our content. We have our single page app store. I didn't touch anything.
Waiting for the agent. This time you have to do it without the diagram.
Yeah, it looks like it's thinking.
It's funny, it sounds like it's playing cold music.
It does sound like that, doesn't it?
Of course.
One moment, please.
This always happens to me.
Sounds like this. I wish I had
I wish we did have old music.
Yeah,
to vamp for us.
once the blinds went up, everything.
We can do the Jeopardy theme song. That always calms me down.
Oh, we're losing people. you go to, I think it was slide 35.
Yeah, 35. Oh, there we go.
Okay. Okay, we're getting there. Here we are. Okay. So as I was saying, so our solution is relatively simpler. It's entirely serverless. We have Amazon CloudFront serving up content. We have our single-page application in S3. We built 12 microservices using Lambda. The microservices coordinate using SNS SQS. Our transactional storage is in both DynamoDB and in S3, and we stood up one RDS for reporting purposes that has DynamoDB for storage. So that's on the right-hand side. Our application integrates with business services that are our legacy services, and we also integrate with new patterns, like I mentioned, Catapult, which is the Cognito integration, which are enterprise-wide that we're able to consume and use. In terms of scope, we'll go back one. We have 98 Lambdas, 43 SNS, 28 SQS, 19 DynamoDB tables, 2 S3 buckets, and 1 RDS. So that gives you a sense of how much compute we have built in those microservices. For the front end, we chose React.js. So React was constructed primarily by Facebook. It's used by brands, Airbnb, Uber, Netflix, and there's a variety of others. We felt very confident that it was a lightweight, fast, simple, scalable front-end JavaScript-based user interface that we could leverage. So with a very simple solution, leveraging serverless, we spent a lot of time. I think part of the session is how did you achieve speed? And I think part of the story is it's not just technology. We spent 105 days. We spent time looking at those 105 days, trying to extract out what were the difference makers in going fast. We made 1 million decisions in that short period of time, and it was a blur for us. But when we look back at it, we want to share with you the things that were really relevant in terms of going fast. So we'll talk a little bit about foundations, which are some of the strategies. We very much feel like we're standing on the shoulders of giants. So there were things that preceded us at the enterprise level and strategies and decisions that were taken that we could leverage, and that helped us go fast. We talk about agility, a mindset of solving one problem at a time, and also that refactoring is okay, the close proximity of IT and business working together in smart sequencing. We'll talk a little bit about how important culture was. So how technology can be a liberator of innovation within teams and people that became prevalent as we progressed through this new tech stack. And lastly, on the product side, as Maureen alluded to, some days when you're in IT, you feel like you're hitting singles. Some days you feel like you're hitting maybe doubles or triples. But there's certain times where you get the luck and you're able to hit a home run. And the incentive, how you feel dedicated and incented to build when you know you have a cathedral at the end of it. So in terms of foundations, the College Board in 2016 brought forward a set of principles to help us move from a monolithic architecture into a modern one. So here we have the 7 principles. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but our speed could not have been achieved the first day. Maybe you're in some form of a transformation and you have principles that you're following. The first thing you don't try and do if you're trying to go from a monolithic architecture to a decoupled one isn't to try and go super fast. We're about 2 years into that journey, and we were able to go fast because of some of the things that were here. So if you look at Agile, for example, we weren't an Agile organization 2 years ago or 3 years ago, but we had coaches that got embedded into our teams and taught us the power of the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the dev team. That self-organizing principle became apparent for us. We also had microservices training, so teaching engineers who may have come from a Java background to learn how to build microservices using JavaScript. And a mindset that you're not a Java engineer, you're a software engineer became prevalent in some of those trainings. So another aspect of this, and we kept coming back to the story, so this is probably the 3rd time now that we've seen this, of as a team, we want to build a single web page application so that we can learn about Catapult. Embedded in this story is about 30 lines of code. So we used 30 lines of code and we integrated with our brand pattern library to give us our look and feel. We integrated with our global header and footer, which are widgets that kind of surround our page. And we integrated with the catapult pattern, which is Cognito, which gave us authentication. So in a very simple story with 30 lines of code, because of the work that preceded us, we were very quickly able to focus on get something stood up as our first story. The other thing that's important here is that the first story we took wasn't configuring servers. We weren't trying to spend time and figure out how to tune when the next patch may be. It enabled us to very quickly focus on business function and not just the one that we're working on. What's the next function? That's where our minds were focused at this time. In terms of agility, so that's, in terms of agility, of all the things in my mind that were important to us going fast, being an agile organization was at the top of that list for me. We had 25 features kind of made up the full scope of what the scholarship program is, and we were able to work upstream from the dev teams working on the actual code and deciding that 25 features isn't what we have to deliver at launch. We only need to deliver 10. So that took the scope down very quickly. We had strong business and IT alignment and making strategic decisions about what functions do we want to have the teams work on first. Let's get the complexity out of let's de-risk this, get fidelity in our solution by taking harder stories early on. We had impediments along the way. So one of the impediments we had is we started out as a 7-person team and we grew to 30 over the course of 6 months. That left practical space implications where we couldn't sit together. So we raised those as impediments organizationally. We had mechanisms organizationally to resolve those impediments. So we got a spot on a floor that was our space. We could co-locate our teams together. That unlocked the communication, that increased the collaboration, and really was an important aspect of, I don't think we would have been able to make it if we weren't able to get together. An aspect of agility that comes into play that we found is also the comfort in refactoring. So you got to start somewhere. So you build the first thing and you deliver it, and there's a tendency and a desire to try and look further downstream of what may be coming next and how can I build this next thing so that I don't have to deal with that. Like I'm positioning myself well, and that comes to play naturally. But we had a bias to action. So you could spend all your time looking downstream and never build a thing. We just wanted to keep moving. And that resulted in some cases, spending a sprint refactoring things that we had already done. Culture was very important in our speed. And there's some connective tissue here in culture that we found in looking back at this. So how does culture from a team that's growing born? It's born of, well, we had a sense of agility, so there was an aspect of we wanted teams to feel empowered. We had new technology that was bringing, on agility, a mindset that as managers, we're not telling, we're listening. We're listening to what the teams are saying. That came about right just before launch. One of the engineers said, we should have a bug bash. We should all get in a room and focus on the mobile devices, which are so important for students, and see what kinds of things we can find. So we all got in a room, and we were able to find and resolve several issues in that experience very quickly because we were listening. Technology came into play in that we had a legacy of Java, a legacy of Oracle and Informatica, and we were moving into JavaScript. So we had a lot of new talent that came in and a mix of senior, junior, and mid-level engineers, and we wanted them to have a culture of learning. So in many cases, the new engineers were learning about the College Board. The existing Java engineers were learning JavaScript. So we wanted to focus on that culture of learning, and that has persisted beyond just the launch of the application. And lastly, in terms of product vision, the timing of having to go so fast and the fact that this was a scholarship program to help students to get into college, and it's harder to build a commitment. You string those words together, a scholarship program to help students get into college, that's going to impact your culture. It's going to create dedication just by the outcome that you're trying to achieve. So we found that those things were all strung together. And at the end, that culminated into a one-team mindset. We grew from 7 to 30. Where we landed was a culture of dedication, a culture of empowerment, and a culture of learning. And that embodying that as we went helped us achieve speed. So lastly, in terms of product, so we benefited from that foundational work. We leveraged agility. And we focused on a culture, but it was so nice to have a cathedral to build. So there's a story of talking to 3 engineers. What do you do? Well, I lay bricks. What do you do? I build walls. What do you do? I build cathedrals. There's a big difference in having a product vision that people can associate with. It drives you every day. The other aspect of the product is that we had a very well-known and understood backlog. So you could see all the pieces fitting together. That was important from an agile context. We weren't figuring out the what just ahead of the how. If we were figuring out the what just ahead of the how, you're more likely to get into things where, oh, there's a dependency here that'll slow you down. There's an impediment here that will slow you down. So by having such a good knowledge and deep knowledge of the product backlog, that helped us tremendously. So those are the ingredients in terms of a formula of foundations, of agility, of culture, and product that helped us go fast. But there were a couple technical lessons that we also wanted to walk through in delivering this. At the beginning of the year, we were not a DevOps operation. We had a legacy application that was in a shared VPC that was managed by a shared services team, and we had deployments on a schedule of about once a month. It was about all we could do. Now, I'm a little bit new to DevOps, so the analogy that I have when I think of DevOps is doing your laundry. So you have dirty clothes, you can either go to a laundromat, or you can have your own washer dryer. Now, if you go to a laundromat, you have dependencies. You have to schedule time to go there. You have to use their machines. Maybe their machines aren't working. Maybe they're not the machines that you like. The soap that they have isn't the soap that you want to use. But there's a sense of dependencies. If you're DevOps, you have your own washing machine and your own dryer. You can wash your clothes at any time. You can do them in the batch sizes that you want. You can use the soap that you want. You can use the fabric softener that you want. It gives you complete dependence. And if you do a load of whites and you put a red sock in there and all your clothes turn pink, you have no one to blame but yourself. You have ownership of that. So there's an accountability that goes with it. So our goal in DevOps through the course of the year, we wanted to deliver all the business function, but we wanted to do it in the modern way. So we stood up pipelines for each of the assets that we had and tried to establish standards. So we used AWS Code Pipeline. We had been in Jenkins in our legacy applications, and we felt like Code Pipeline was best for us in the long term. We have a monolithic heritage at the College Board, so we're going through this evolution to a more modern state. And there's 2 stories that we played in solving for the scholarships that we want to walk through, and I'll kind of bring them up quickly. So we had an original mindset, Maureen alluded to, we have to get college lists from another application. So we thought we want to get them into Dynamo so we can access them via Cognito in our serverless pattern. So we wanted to just do a batch migration. That was the first way we thought about it. Let's migrate all this data from MySQL over into DynamoDB, and in that process, we'll associate Catapult IDs. That's the wrong mindset. We wanted to be event-driven. So instead of being batch, as a student comes in and needs to get those college lists from the legacy, that's the time in which we intervene to bring them into Dynamo. But there was a mindset shift that we had to go through in that process. There's some power, so we talked about React on the front end, and there's some power here with React and AWS. Single-page applications are not SEO friendly, so we had to solve for that. And it kind of has 2 components to it. So there's a build component, which leverage code pipeline. We found there's a tool called React Snap that we leverage in our build process that stands up. There's an Express.js server that stands up our application and recursively goes through the tree to render that static content and stores it in files. On the inbound side, we have CloudFront and the Lambda Edge, which can intercept that user agent and say, is this a bot or is this a user? If it's a bot, it points it to the static site pre-rendering. And if it's a user, it brings them into the application. So this is our build process associated with our DevOps and leverages Lambda Edge and CloudFront to be able to route traffic so we have searchability. Len mentioned this earlier, DynamoDB On Demand. So we ended up adopting DynamoDB On Demand. It came out in November 2018 in reInvent. We had already essentially built the application using techniques to optimize cost of how Dynamo scaled. So I guess the point here is that Sometimes you have to solve for problems that may become services. We could have gone faster if it had existed, because we probably spent a sprint cycle just trying to fine-tune Dynamo Lambda relative to cost management. And now it's something we don't have to worry about anymore. It's a managed service. It's fantastic. And we were able to integrate it in one single sprint. So heading down the stretch in the application, so most of the core functionality was ready by around October, but we did have to harden our application. So how we did that was some scenario planning. We all got in a room and said, how's it going to break? We just built all this stuff so fast. How is this going to break? And we write sticky notes, and everybody just writes down what they think could go wrong. You do it early enough so you have time to respond to it. And that helped us come up with negative ops scenarios or experiences that may be impacted. So we had something called chaos theory that basically pulled down business services. How did that impact the experience? We did very focused mobile testing. I mentioned the bug bash. And what we really did was talk to the teams. We said, okay, we're going to go live in a few weeks. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel? Come back, I'm a 7. What's it going to take to make you an 8? What's it going to take to make you a 9? And we decomposed a list, and then we took action against that list. That was our pattern for hardening. So there were some big rocks that we had to take to plan for, but we wanted to make sure that we heard from the engineers, what do you think we need to do to make this a more stable delivery? So scale of 1 to 10 was very important for us. Lastly, cost. So on launch day, the cost for us using, as we needed, $123.41 was our cost with our solution stack. So we thought that was important to share. So in order what to take away from this, so serverless for us with S3 Dynamo and Lambdas helped us focus on business function. That's where we were able to spend most of our time. There were some foundational investments in Agile, modernizing our stack that helped inform our culture, attract talent, and help us go fast. We were very comfortable also refactoring in our agility. And lastly, there is that connective tissue in culture between technology, agility, and product that something only in reflection could we really put our hands on that. So thank you very much.
So folks, we're available for a few more minutes. So we're available for a few more minutes to answer questions, and I think Jack and Maureen have offered to also, after time, to also be out in the hallway to answer any questions. So yeah, let's have at it with some questions. Sure.
How do you go about doing testing?
The question was, how do you grow by doing testing?
So we had test automation. We used Selenium WebDriver.js as a part of our testing suite. It's not yet fully integrated into our pipeline, so we don't have push-button automated workflows, but we automated all the testing with Selenium WebDriver.js.
And we have a mic floating around there. I think this lady over here has a question.
Great. I had a question about with your Catapult solution. That was an existing. That was legacy in your.
No, it was new. So we leveraged Cognito. That's something that was built before we actually had to build the application. It was an enterprise solution that leveraged Cognito.
Right. So the user story was you wanted to build the app to learn more about the Cognito solution, right?
Right. It was the first time our team had integrated with it. So that's where the user story came in.
All right. Cool. I think that clarifies. Okay. And also, do you have all the 25 features integrated already?
We're doing it as we launch. So we launched the Improved Scholarship in March. We have the next scholarship is in August, and then there's 2 in October and 1 more. So we're basically incrementing throughout the course of this year.
That's awesome. Are you finding? I'm sorry. I'm like, are there other questions?
We can talk outside too.
Oh yeah, I can definitely talk to you outside.
Oh, meet outside.
I have a question actually
Sure.
about what type of security testing did you guys do, and did you guys have to go through an ATO process?
So the question was, what type of security testing, and did they have to do an ATO, authority to operate, government compliance thing?
We didn't do 8.
We did 3D testing with secure code review, and as well as we did the penetration.
Pen testing, yes.
Yeah, the pen testing was one they worked with us to basically say, We have a process. It's actually automated. It's actually even almost gone away now. So now there's actually, you can literally just run your own penetration testing. If you do a search on Google for AWS penetration testing, it'll describe for you the process. And we'll even offer you some tools for helping with that.
Oh,
There's a question right here.
Yeah, is it a mobile web app, or is it like React Native, or is it
no, it's progressive.
Yeah, the question was if it's a mobile app. Oh, I think we have a question here.
Yeah, have you thought about data portability? You're on AWS. Have you thought about going to another cloud provider or bringing it back in-house? Have you had any thoughts around that at all?
We decided when we had our North Stars that we were opinionated about being AWS. But we thought we might, too much analysis would lead to no decision, so that we set our course in that direction.
So one of the things we always talk about at AWS is that we build services that allow you to move in and move out. So what that means is that if you, for example, have data in a Dynamo table, there's actually a GitHub project that shows you how to make that exportable. So you can actually run a process to export all the data to to storing it as files. And actually, you can actually use leverage known as DynamoDB streams. So I actually have a customer who has a process where they're running stuff to ingest into Dynamo and then streaming it and writing it to another destination. So all of our services have that way to move data into AWS as well as to move out. And if you ever need any help moving stuff out of AWS, let your solutions architect know and we'll figure out a solution for you.
Well, thank you for saying that. Day number 3, and you're the first person to say that. I've been asking this question every day, and I appreciate you actually telling us that.
No, definitely. Find a solutions architect and we'll help you.
If there are any other questions, you can take them outside. I think we're just about out of time.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you folks for the
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.